Today I'm out in the forest with arguably the benchmark crossover in the compact luxury segment, the BMW X3. Now, benchmark is an interesting concept. It does not necessarily mean the best in the segment. It simply means the standard by which everything else is measured. How did BMW achieve that kind of status with the X3? I think it's actually easy to see because this is, in fact, one of the best small luxury crossovers in America. It also happens to be one of the best-selling luxury crossovers in America, and BMW's best-selling anything in America. I think the X3 ended up the benchmark in this segment because it is so well-rounded. There are definitely other SUVs out there with more legroom, more cargo room, better performance, better handling, better whatever, but none of them is going to be as well-rounded as the X3. This excels in pretty much every category. It's roomy on the inside, has a decent amount of cargo, it handles exceptionally well, it's relatively fuel efficient, and yes, I also think it is pretty attractive. Let me know what you think about the new grille up front. For 2022, the X3's main changes are styling. We have a revised front grille, we have a mild hybrid system under the hood with the 3-liter turbo, revised infotainment electronics on the inside. Full LED headlights over here on the side, no fog lights down below, and this is the M Performance model, the 40i version. I've always found the side profile of the X3 to be elegant and perhaps a little bit station wagony, mainly due to this really long hood proportion that we find here. That's in order to accommodate that 3-liter inline-6 engine. There really is no other entry in America in this segment that offers a 3-liter inline-6, and that's why most of the hoods you'll find in the competition are considerably shorter, especially the front-wheel drive alternatives. This has that classic luxury sedan on stilts look. At just under 186 inches long, this is also one of the larger entries in the compact luxury crossover segment. There are a few options that are a little bit bigger, but this is right there with the meat of the segment, where the GLC sits and, of course, the new Genesis GV70. And in many ways, I think the GV70 is really chasing the X3. Seemingly coming out of nowhere, Genesis has a number of products that remind me a lot of the corresponding and competitive BMW products in the segment, because the GV70 is also very, very well-rounded. As you'd expect out of a more performance-oriented trim, we have upgraded tires all the way around, 245, 45 R20s up front, and these are Bridgestone Alenza tires, so definitely grippier than the average tire that you'll find on a Lexus NX or a GLC 300, but not quite the next level, where you'd find the BMW X3M. Ground clearance is a fairly healthy 8 inches in the X3, whether you get the 3-liter turbo or the 2-liter turbo, but in a nod to the performance aspirations of this model, we have wider tires in the rear, 275 with tires back here. Some folks I've talked to this week found the tail lamp arrangement a little bit controversial, but to be honest, BMW saves their most controversial looks for the 4 Series. These tail lamp modules are full LEDs, just as you'd expect in a luxury vehicle, and we have twin exhaust tips down there at the back. But the bulk of the sheet metal has not changed too much for 2022. Again, this is a mild refresh. Be sure and let me know what you think about the design of the X3 down there in the comments section. Which do you think is the most attractive entry in the segment? I think that the BMW does a good job of being very middle of the road here. Under the hood, the engine lineup ranges from mild to wild. The base engine is a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine producing 248 horsepower. This one is the optional 3-liter inline-6 that you'll find in the M40i version. This gives you 382 horsepower. If you want the real M, that will get you up to 503 horsepower if you check the competition option box. All engines are mated to an 8-speed automatic transmission, and the only rear-wheel drive option in the X3 is with the 2-liter 4-cylinder. All the other models are going to get BMW's all-wheel drive system. As a result, the 2-liter base engine is going to be the most efficient, giving you 25 miles per gallon combined. This engine comes in at 23 mpg. This 3-liter inline-6 also features BMW's 48-volt mild hybrid system, but this is not quite as hybridy, I guess you'd say, as the 3-liter inline-6 that we find in the Mercedes lineup. That one uses a more powerful electric motor. This one is rated just for 11 horsepower, and it has a few more 48-volt electric powered accessories, most notably an electric air conditioning compressor. This one does not have that particular feature. So if you're living in a hotter climate, this vehicle will have to keep the engine running in order to run the air conditioning, and in Mercedes vehicles with their mild hybrid system, it won't. It can actually leave the engine off, still cool the cabin, start the engine when needed. Instead, BMW's mission with this mild hybrid system was to help start the engine a little bit more rapidly, so the auto start-stop system feels more cohesive with the vehicle design, and also power future 48-volt accessories. Front seat comfort is excellent, as is the seating position in here. I give these seats 9 out of 10 points. We have a multi-way adjustable driver's seat, inflatable side bolsters, 4-way adjustable lumbar, and a manual extending thigh cushion. We also have a manual adjustable tilt telescopic steering column with a large range of motion and a 2-position memory on the driver's door. Oddly enough, the front passenger seat does not have the same range of motion as the driver's seat. It's missing the adjustable lumbar support, the inflatable bolsters, but it does have the manual extending thigh cushion. There are certainly going to be a few options in this segment that are going to be a bit more comfortable. I found the seats in the XC60 to be a hair more comfortable than the ones in here, and Volvo offers front seat massage. And there are also going to be a few options in this segment that for the same price as this will offer you a passenger seat with the same range of motion as the driver's seat. Thanks to the very upright design of the X3, getting into the rear seats is very easy. The roofline is nice and square and nice and high. But you will certainly notice the design compromises for having the really long hood proportion that we find in the X3. This pillar right here, the pillar right next to the driver's head, is definitely a little far forward. And this door opening is not as wide as some of the alternatives in this segment that have a shorter hood. It's simply a packaging reality. When you've got a vehicle that is only so long and you have a longer hood, everything else behind has to be a little bit more upright and a little bit more compact. But I kind of like the compromise involved in this because it does mean we have a very upright seating position here. With this ceiling open, this has the optional panoramic moonroof, I have about 4 inches of headroom, and even in the models that don't have this moonroof option, headroom is still very generous. Also, the seating position is more upright, and that's definitely something that I prefer. With this front seat back in its tracks, I have about 3 inches of legroom left. You will notice that there is less legroom in the rear in the X3, combined legroom total as well, versus a lot of the competition. Simply has to do with that long hood up front. Now, if I move over here to the middle seat, still plenty of headroom. The rear bench is definitely very bucket shaped, but it's fairly wide. You shouldn't have too much of a problem fitting 3 child seats across the back, but if I try and go over here to the right side, this front seat is all the way back in its track, suitable for a 6'5" person that I had in there earlier. And as you can see, I just can't put my knees behind this seat at all. As far as child seats go, forward-facing child seats shouldn't be a problem in here, and boosters shouldn't be a problem either, but rear-facing seats, I think this is too tight for most adults to sit up front with the rear facing right behind. You could try and put one in the middle, but these front seats would definitely still have to be moved quite a bit forward. Rear passengers get air vents in the center console. This has a 3-zone automatic climate control system, and at the bottom of that center console, we have 2 USB-C charge-only ports. When it comes to cargo capacity, the X3 is technically mid-pack as far as cubic feet are concerned, just over 28 cubic feet back here behind the power hatch. But I love the fact that this power hatch opens and closes quickly. We also find hinges and the power mechanism for that hatch that are really well integrated into the roofline, so they don't take up much space on the side. And the cargo area, as you can see, is very square. This hatch is fairly vertical for a modern crossover. If you want something with a sexier, more coupe-like styling, that's where the X4 comes in. But if you want something that's much more classic and honestly more cargo practical, that's going to be the X3. In addition to being very square, this cargo area has a ton of other practical touches. We have a 40-20-40 folding rear seat back. This is significantly more practical than a simple ski pass-through. The rear seats recline. You can see that is the most upright position. That's the most reclined position right there. We also have these really handy cargo tie-down points that slide around in the tracks here, and they're also removable if you don't want them in the way. That is a really thoughtful touch. Storage areas on either side, bag holders, things like that. And BMW gives us more storage here under the load floor and a place to put the roller tonneau cover. That's something that a lot of luxury car companies don't really spend much time thinking about. And if you're the kind of person that occasionally wants it in and occasionally wants it out, and you find yourself at the store going, where on earth do I put this thing? BMW has a solution there under the floor. In terms of sheer volume, there are cargo areas in this segment that are bigger than this, but in terms of number of 24-inch roller bags you can stack back here, this is right in line with the best in this segment at 5 roller bags. I'm certainly a pragmatist when it comes to cargo hauling, and that's why this cargo area gets a 9 out of 10 points in my exclusive Trunk Comfort Index. As we look around the interior, keep in mind that the MSRP on this model is $63,300. We have sliding sun visors there for the driver and front passenger, this large panoramic moonroof that goes to just about the rear passenger's heads. As you can see, those rear seat passenger headrests fold. Up front, we have fixed height shoulder belts. This is a move that we've been seeing in other BMW products. It likely is to reduce costs. I do prefer shoulder belts that adjust in height, though. We have 4-way adjustable headrests. You can see the really attractive seat design in this model. Plenty of bolstering going on there, but you can also see that if you're a driver or a front passenger in this position, you're going to have limited side visibility because of where that B-pillar is in the car. And even though I don't have my seat as far back from my driving position, it is definitely in my field of vision. Moving over to the front doors, lots of soft touch and premium materials here. We have the ambient lighting strip currently set to purple. So you can see this model doesn't have wood. It has this really interesting textured metal trim on the door panel. It has a really attractive look. And then under that soft satin chrome section, there's another lighting strip. Lots of stitched materials there, definitely a very attractive look. Moving over to the dashboard, even more stitched materials, but not quite as much premium leather on the dashboard as you'll find in some of the more expensive alternatives. On the other hand, this kind of material is likely going to last longer in the sun, so there's always a compromise here. Moving down to the glove compartment, we have a bin-style compartment. I was just barely able to fit a 10-inch tablet computer inside. Larger ones probably would not fit. Moving over to the dashboard, we have a new infotainment screen. This is just over 12 inches there, and it's joined by a just over 12-inch LCD instrument cluster on the driver's side. As you can see, this supports smartphone integration, but only wireless Apple CarPlay integration. There's no option for wired CarPlay for some reason. Over here we have the typical BMW iDrive interface that we find in pretty much every modern BMW model. A touchscreen interface, a touch controller interface, and it also supports hand gestures, so you can rotate your finger in front of the screen, for instance, and adjust the volume. Although iDrive is a little bit less intuitive than some of the systems in this segment, I have always liked the look. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comments section below. The dark theme is not only minimalist, but I think it looks good in the day and good at night as well, and it's a little bit more intuitive to wander around in than Mercedes' latest infotainment system. Below that, we have the controls for the climate control system. The rear zone is controlled via that LCD or through the controls in the back. Heated seat controls here, controls for the infotainment system, physical volume knob. These are touch programmable buttons in the system. They're not only touch sensitive, but they also have haptic feedback, so when you click on them, you can feel a physical click there. They're programmable to a wide variety of different functions in there. They're not simply radio presets. Below that, we have a little M badge, since the 40i version is an M performance model. We have a roller shade style cover over the bin where you can keep your smartphone. There is a USB plug there, but it's not for CarPlay. So again, this is wireless CarPlay only, but this vehicle does not have a wireless charger in it at this particular price tag. Over here, we have two large cup holders, 12-volt power outlet. Over here, we have the controller for that infotainment system, along with a touchpad dial there. BMW's typical joystick style shifter. An unlock button on the side. We pull that back for drive. Once we're in drive, we can move it over to the side for the manual or sport modes. Hit the P button to park the vehicle and it will return to center. Optional buttons over here on the left side, buttons to control the drive mode, engine start stop button there. This does have an adaptive suspension system, so the drive modes will also control that. Auto brake hold, electric parking brake. And then between the front seats, we have a softly padded center armrest that opens to reveal a moderately sized storage compartment. Keep in mind that the transmission and parts of the all-wheel drive system are right here under this area, because the engine stops basically right at the very front of that dashboard unit. Over here on the driver's side, again, we have a 12.3-inch LCD instrument cluster, but this is not quite as configurable as far as themes go as what we see in modern Mercedes products. On the right side, we have trip computer. We can scroll through a number of different functions there. This model has BMW's full-color heads-up display. It's located just above that 12.3-inch instrument cluster, and it has the M Performance steering wheel. It has the contrasting stitching, you can see in two colors here, blue and red. Pretty aggressive sport grips up top, and it's nice and thickly rimmed. That's definitely something that I prefer. Another nice touch, leather airbag cover rather than the plastic airbag cover like we find in some of the competition. Over here on the turn signal stalk, there's a BC button. That's how we rotate through options on that LCD instrument cluster. Everything else is located on the steering wheel. Big paddles back there again. The controls for the cruise control system over here on the left side. This is not adaptive cruise control, which is something that I would expect to see for $63,000, but that is an option. Over here we have controls for the infotainment system, and if we click this button, you can scroll through options in the heads-up display. The control for the heated steering wheel is right there in the middle. First, let's talk 0 to 60 numbers. In a dealer-provided 2-liter turbo model, I ran 0 to 60 in 6 seconds even. That is a little on the slow side compared to a lot of the newer base entries in this segment, especially if we're talking about the new Mercedes-Benz GLC with its base engine, or the Alfa Romeo Stelvio, etc. Those have pretty powerful base engines and surprisingly quick accelerations for base models. But we're here to talk about the 3-liter inline-6, and in this model, 0 to 60 happened in 4.3 seconds. I think it's easy to see why all-wheel drive is standard here. This has so much power, so much low-end torque, and the acceleration is really aggressive right off the line that if this was just rear-wheel drive, the rear tires would not be able to keep up and it would be slower. And also, on your favorite winding mountain road, it would be a lot more dangerous to floor it around corners, and this has a very stable, very predictable feel out on the road. BMW's all-wheel drive system is certainly targeted to send more power to the rear axle than the front, but it still has a great balanced feel out on the road. In my 60-0 braking test, thanks to the wide and grippy tires on this model, that happened in just 108 feet. That is a very short stopping distance for a crossover in this category. And that includes not just this 3-liter inline-6 model, but also the 2-liter turbo, especially if you get the optional tire packages in that model. BMWs consistently have very short stopping distances. That's obviously important when you're designing vehicles for high-speed operation. BMW again chose to give this all-wheel drive system a bit of a rear power bias, but it's not as rear power biased as some. So when you floor this around corners, you'll feel a very gentle push in the rear, but this is never going to be tail happy like the adjustable all-wheel drive systems that you find in BMW's full-on M models. A number of all-wheel drive M models have a front axle disconnect feature where they can be pure rear-wheel drive and give you that level of excitement. This does not. This is always trying to be a fun daily driver vehicle where you can do whatever you want out on your favorite winding mountain road and feel very secure. BMW's mission with the X3 was to make this a small crossover that really drives and feels more like one of BMW's small sedans, and they have certainly achieved that even though this has 8 inches of ground clearance. This feels very much like a BMW X3. It feels small, it feels nimble out on the road. This is not the kind of small crossover that feels bigger and heavier than it really is out on the road, which sometimes applies to the XC60 or an RDX or a Lexus NX. This instead feels sportier, more dynamic, and more nimble, and certainly a lot of fun to drive. Out on a rougher road like the gravel road that we're on here, the sportier mission of this trim of X3 is obvious, as are the lower profile tires, so you'll certainly feel those road imperfections coming through to the cabin. This has an adaptive suspension system, and it is certainly firmer in sport than it is in the comfort mode. I think I'm going to go back to comfort there. But the variations are not quite as large as in some of the adaptive suspension systems out there. And if I engage one of the configurable individual modes in here, and I go over to damping, you'll notice that there are only 2 modes, sport and comfort. When it comes to ride quality, I'm going to give this particular model a B-. There are options in this relatively small segment that have adaptive air suspensions, and those do give you a softer, more supple ride. Now, obviously, they're going to give up a little bit when it comes to sporty driving dynamics, and that's likely why BMW chose not to do that with this. Although I find this suspension tune a little on the firm side, this is absolutely still appropriate for longer daily commutes or the average road trip. In my cabin noise testing at 50 miles an hour, I measured 71.5 decibels in here. That surprised me with the really wide tires that we have in the back. Again, 275 with tires on the rear. As a result of that cabin noise figure, I'm going to give this model an A. When it comes to fuel economy, I have to give this a B-, or perhaps a C+. Fuel economy has been a little bit better, generally speaking, in BMW models than some of the European competition especially, but that no longer seems to be true, especially with the advent of more mild hybrid systems, full-on hybrid systems, and plug-in hybrid systems available in this segment. The Volvo plug-in hybrid system, for instance, is very fuel efficient. It's just about as quick as this 0 to 60. Obviously, it gives up a lot in terms of handling ability, but it is going to give you 27-28 miles per gallon and an electric range. Same thing goes to the other plug-in hybrid options that are out there in this European segment. Now, the Lexus NX really cannot hold a candle to this when it comes to driving acceleration, driving enjoyment, etc., braking scores, but it is going to be significantly more efficient than this. There's an approximately 40 mile per gallon model, and there's a model that will give you nearly 40 miles of electric range and high 30s in terms of fuel economy. I have to admit that this particular mild hybrid system is a bit of a missed opportunity for BMW. It definitely starts and stops very smoothly, so right now the engine is off, and when I want to move out here into traffic, it starts very smoothly, very quickly. But because BMW chose not to put an electric air conditioning compressor under the hood, this is not going to shut off the engine in hotter climates, so in those areas of the United States, it's not going to save you as much fuel as a Mercedes with the EQ system, or of course the full hybrids and plug-in hybrids that are available out there. In addition, this mild hybrid system has no electric-only mode, and it's a little bit less aggressive at shutting off the engine. Bottom line, the X3 is a ton of fun out on the road. This handles well, the 3-liter inline-6 is buttery smooth. This is one of the best engines available on sale in America today. It is smooth and quiet when you want it to be smooth and quiet, and it has a great sound when you rev it up. On the downside for the X3, fuel economy comes in a little bit below some of the competitors, and that is something that BMW has done well with in the past, but a lot of the competitors with their mild hybrid systems, full hybrid systems, and plug-in hybrid systems have this beat when it comes to performance with fuel economy. For 2022, BMW has priced the X3 right in the middle of the luxury compact crossover segment. It starts at $43,700 for the rear-wheel drive model. You can get a rear-wheel drive version, and that's getting a little bit more and more unusual in the luxury segment, to be honest. Most people seem to be interested in all-wheel drive, so a lot of manufacturers are just making that standard. But if you like the dynamics of a rear-wheel drive vehicle that has a great weight balance, BMW will still sell you one of those. If you want all-wheel drive, it's going to be $45,700. If you want the model that I was driving that started at $58,700, it had a decent amount of options on it, of course. If you want to go 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds, that would be the X3M, starting at $70,100. As you'd expect from a benchmark in this segment, the X3 is not the most expensive. It's not the least expensive either. It slots really right in the middle, definitely between Audi and Mercedes. With that out of the way, let's dive into the first competitor, which is going to be the Audi Q5. The Q5 is less expensive, but it starts out with a less powerful engine as well. The next trim level is the 45 TFSI version, and that gets you comparable power to the base X3, and a comparable base price, honestly, as well. $45,800 for that model. All-wheel drive is again standard, and that's just about $100 more than the X3. If you want a plug-in hybrid, the Q5 is one of the few options left in this segment. A lot of luxury car companies have decided to cancel their plug-in hybrid models, instead reserving their EV tax credits for full EVs that will be coming later. BMW has done that with the X3, because they're going to have some full EV models coming very shortly. Mercedes has done the same thing with the GLC. Audi, interestingly enough, is following the same playbook as Volvo is, however, giving us plug-in hybrids and full EVs at the same time. In terms of driving dynamics, the X3 I think is a little bit better than the Q5, although the Q5 is excellent as well. The Audi platform tends to have a little bit more weight up front. Some people like that driving dynamic, some people don't. It's really more of a personal preference. The Audi is, however, a great value. I also think it's very attractive. It has a big cargo area in the back, and Audi's instrument cluster is fantastic. The infotainment system, I think I like iDrive just a little bit more than the infotainment system in the center, but the instrument cluster is absolutely fantastic. Audi's large LCD instrument cluster features Google Mapping. You do have to pay for that feature to keep it live, but it is one of the best looking instrument clusters. It's also very fully featured, and I happen to like the design. Next up, we have one of the less expensive options in the segment, the Lexus NX. The Lexus and the Acura are related to less expensive mainstream vehicles in those manufacturers' larger global portfolios. So the NX is somewhat closely related to the Toyota RAV4, and it does share hybrid and plug-in hybrid systems with the RAV4. Oddly enough, it also shares base engines with the RAV4, and as a result, it is one of the slowest entries in this segment 0 to 60, 8.2 seconds for the front-wheel drive non-turbo model. On the other hand, that model is significantly less expensive, starting at around $39,000. And it's going to likely be less expensive to keep around, maintain, insure, etc. So the Lexus options are generally going to be the least expensive ones to keep around. The Lexus portfolio is also very hybrid focused. Again, there is a regular hybrid model and there's a plug-in hybrid model. So if you'd like to get nearly 40 miles of range and nearly 40 mpg in your next luxury crossover, there's a Lexus for you. I'm not the biggest fan of the interior design in the NX. It comes across as a little bit cartoony. It definitely is more premium than the previous generation NX, and I like the styling inside more than the last generation NX, but if you get the enormous touchscreen LCD infotainment system in the dashboard, then it just looks a little bit too big, to be honest. And I never thought I would say that because I do love LCD screens on the inside of a car, and I don't mind 14 or 15-inch screens, depending on how they're integrated. Be sure and let me know what you think about the interior of the NX down there in the comment section, especially if you've seen the interior of one in person. Next up, we have perhaps the most direct competitor to the X3. That would be the Mercedes-Benz GLC. Like the BMW, Mercedes offers the vehicle in 4 different power levels. You can get the base GLC 300, then there's the entry-level AMG, then there's the full-on AMG, and then there's the full-on AMG with the S if you want over 500 horsepower in your next compact luxury crossover. In terms of driving dynamics, the BMW and the Mercedes are very, very comparable as long as they have comparable tires and comparable wheels on them. And that is one important thing to keep in mind. If you're driving these back-to-back from dealer lots, keep in mind that you might be in a GLC 300 or a GLC 43 AMG with grippier tires on it, and those grippier tires are probably going to be available on the X3, but the X3 might not have those tires on the one that you drove, so those direct comparisons are important. Make sure if you're trying to compare which vehicle fits you best, that you're comparing like vehicle to like vehicle. As we see in the BMW lineup, in the Mercedes lineup, there are tons of options. There are sport trim appearance packages, there are tons of different wheel options, different tire options, tons of color and paint options as well. If you want one of the more configurable vehicles in this segment, it's going to be the Mercedes-Benz GLC. And as a result, it's going to be more expensive as well. Not just in terms of base price, but in terms of the cost of those option packages. If you get carried away with options, you can easily get a Mercedes-Benz GLC to be $20,000, $30,000 more expensive than something like the Lexus NX, and even $5,000 to $10,000 more expensive than a BMW X3, depending on the options you select. Personally, I don't find the electronics on the inside of the Mercedes quite as intuitive to use as I drive in the X3, but I do find the graphics more visually appealing. Next up, we have the latest entry from the latest luxury car company in America, the Genesis GV70. Genesis is really an interesting upstart because rather than following the playbook written by Toyota with Lexus or Honda with Acura, Hyundai with Genesis is going about things very, very differently, and they are obviously targeting BMW with driving dynamics and Mercedes with interior refinement and design. And they're doing that with a price tag that has an eye on value, but not an eye on being the lowest priced entry. So it is notably more expensive than an Acura RDX or even a Lexus NX, but it is less expensive than the Audi, the BMW, or the Mercedes. $41,500 gets you 300 horsepower, a 2.5-liter turbo 4-cylinder, and standard all-wheel drive. But unlike the all-wheel drive systems that we find on the Lexus or on the Acura or on the Volvo, this is a rear-wheel drive based system. So it uses the same rear-wheel drive 8-speed automatic transmission that we find in the Genesis G70 and G80 and G90. It's just that Genesis chooses to put their all-wheel drive system standard, but it's still a rear-wheel drive biased all-wheel drive system. So that means that it's going to drive very much like the BMW and the Mercedes in terms of driving dynamics. The weight balance is shockingly similar to those German alternatives as well. Now, at the moment, there is no direct AMG or BMW X3M competitor. And depending on how you want to look at it, there's also no AMG 43 competitor, or perhaps not quite the same thing that we see in the M40i version of the X3. But there is a 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6 that has very similar performance to those options. $53,100 is where that one starts. The big difference is that Genesis is going after a slightly more luxury tune to the vehicle. There is definitely a sport package available with a sport tune suspension and an adaptive suspension as well. But the suspension setup and the tire choices and wheel choices are not that next level. They're not AMG, they're not M or even M Performance. Obviously, that's something that you could do yourself aftermarket. That's a relatively minor change, but it's clear that Genesis is going after maybe a little bit more Mercedes directly in the product lineup than simply just BMW. And it's also obvious when you take a look at the inside, because they offer more color combinations and more color choices than the majority of luxury car companies, Mercedes accepted. There are more than 12 exterior colors in most trims. There are also a ton of different interior color options: blue, red, white, beige, brown, and even a purplish burgundy. If you want to get yourself a sparkly burgundy car on the outside with the burgundy interior, you can get one of those in the GV70. Or if you want to get burgundy matte paint on the outside and a burgundy interior, you can do that as well. Bottom line with the X3, it is absolutely hard to go wrong with this luxury crossover. And there's a reason that the X3 is often considered a benchmark. It's not necessarily the best vehicle in the segment, but it's incredibly well-rounded. It does everything exceptionally well. It may not be the best in value. It may not be the most reliable. It may not be the fastest accelerating or the shortest braking or the best handling, but it does all of those things very well. And there are alternatives, for instance, like a Lexus NX that really excels when it comes to fuel economy, but the other components of the experience just aren't the same level as the BMW. The Mercedes also has, I think, a slightly more opulent cabin, but it's not as well-rounded, I think, as the BMW. Same thing with the Audi as well. But to be perfectly honest, this is really all nitpicking. All of the options available in the compact luxury crossover segment at this moment are absolutely excellent. I think it would be really hard to go wrong with any of them. If my money were on the line right now, however, I suspect I might lean a little bit towards the Genesis GV70. Absolutely couldn't go wrong with the X3. I also really like the XC60. I think it has continued to age very well, but obviously driving dynamics are not really Volvo's forte there. Fuel economy is definitely good in the XC60, especially the plug-in hybrid, but for me it's mainly about the design of the Volvo. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below, and what would you pick if your money were on the line and you were looking to spend around $50,000 to $55,000 on your next luxury crossover. I'll see all of you later.